Hi, I'm Nikki.
And I'm Megan.
Welcome to the Grimdark Diaries.
We're your geek gal pals obsessed with true crime and all things dark and disturbing.
Hi, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Grimdark Diaries. We are your absolute favorite true crime podcast. Or so we're going to tell you we are.
That's right.
Trust us.
Eventually you'll believe us.
Yeah. If we tell you enough times,
That's right.
becomes true.
That's right.
Megan, what did we do on Saturday?
Saturday, well, I was picked up at 5:30 p.m. and taken on a very adventurous GPS ride in your car.
To IKEA for your birthday.
That's right. I was so confused as to where we were going. I only heard the GPS. So we were like on the highway. We were heading out of the city. I was very confused. And then we go into Dartmouth, one of the sub-cities here in HRM. And then all I saw was IKEA. Nikki and her husband were both like, surprise, we're taking you to IKEA. We're going to go shopping for some furniture and you're paying. I was like,
happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me. This is pretty sweet. Okay. And then we rounded the corner and of course it was Palladium, the giant arcade place that they built here, which I was so very excited to go to. That was a lot of fun. I very, very much enjoyed that. It was my first time ever playing any arcade games, and anybody who saw, I think, Nikki, you posted a story on Instagram.
I did.
Yeah, that was awesome. I had a lot of fun. I was playing many different kinds of games. I think we started with some of the easier ones. Oh, God, I can't even remember.
You started with Ninja Turtles.
Ninja Turtles. That was the first one that I started with. I got a little addicted to that one. It reminded me so much of the game I grew up with in the 80s.
Yeah.
I just had to keep playing the side-scrolling one. And then we went off to play some Halo Infinite. That was fun. Was it Infinite? It said
I don't
Halo.
think it was Infinite, but it was Halo.
No, that's the new one. You're right. I'm thinking of the new one coming out. But it was a Halo game. And Nikki and I get to shoot a lot of things. Which
Grunts.
was exciting. That's right. Yeah. Like, I don't play Halo, so I'm not sure what they're called. And we did lots of other things. We played skeetball and basketball, and it was like a carnival. It was so much fun. I was like on cloud 9 that night. I think we were there for what, like 2 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about 2 hours, and we were wilding.
I will mark it as successful for your first arcade mission.
Absolutely. And I absolutely cannot wait to go back because I'm definitely going back. I still have money left on my cards.
Yeah.
So I have to go back sometime. And I think I'm going to take my niece and nephew because, man, oh man, they would absolutely love that place. And I heard it was open till 11 p.m. So we can go again sometime when there won't be children everywhere.
Yeah, I would rather go late on like a weekday.
Yeah.
So that there's less children.
Yes, there were many, 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 many children. And they kept hogging
the good games.
Yes!
Yeah.
I was like, totally. They were hogging all the good games. Especially that Jurassic Park game. Oh my gosh. I was so glad that we actually ended up getting to play that game. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
And then we went back to our friend's place and did some VR games there, which I thought was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That Jurassic Park one tripped me out so bad.
We put Megan in Jurassic Park and then we just watched her as a T-Rex roared in her face. And
I am sure I was
very nervous.
Cowering. It was so realistic. It was crazy. Very, very creepy. Well, with that being said, I think you all remember what category I may have rolled for last week. If not, it was Unsolved Mystery. Not Mysteries, because that was a great show in the 80s and 90s, which I love. I think they brought it back on Netflix, too.
Yeah, and it's great.
I haven't actually watched it yet, so I'm looking forward to catching up on that.
It's really good. The first season is really good. The second season, I didn't enjoy the mysteries as much.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
Yes.
They just weren't that exciting, or?
Yeah, I found that I would end up scrolling on my phone halfway through the episode. Like, just the way they did them wasn't as exciting as the first one.
Oh, like they didn't captivate your attention or anything like that. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I feel like I don't know if there were any episodes back in the olden days of the old show, but man, that guy's voice really drew you in every time, no matter what.
Yeah.
So my unsolved mystery story, we're gonna just jump right into it, I guess. It may have originated from watching Scooby-Doo as a kid, because I mean, I feel like everybody watched Scooby-Doo as a kid.
I did not.
You did not? What?
I didn't like Scooby-Doo.
No way. I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't like Scooby-Doo, really.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't a fan.
Wow, okay. Well,
I've watched some episodes. Well, you know what? I ended up watching a bunch of it as an adult because I used to be a part of a thing here called Geeks versus Nerds.
Oh, yes.
And it is a live comedy debate show. And you get cast in it, and you basically have to argue something. So, you know, who's the bigger badass, Batman or Boba Fett? And there's a team on either side, and you have, so it's like slightly structured. You do have specific arguments you need to make. And then there's like some free-for-all rounds, and then there's a judge, and they decide who, you know, had the best debate. But it's basically just a big comedy show. And I did one once, and I can't remember what the question was. Something about who's the better mystery solving team or something like that. And it was the Scooby Gang from Scooby-Doo or the Scooby Gang from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, well, we all know which one Nikki went for.
Yeah, well, I was on that. I got cast on the Buffy side, but obviously to make my arguments against Scooby-Doo, I had to watch a bunch of Scooby-Doo because I'd never watched it. So I watched like a week's worth of Scooby-Doo, like nonstop in all my free time. So I feel like I've seen every episode, even though I don't like it.
That's hilarious. Wow, there we go. I mean, I don't know if I would enjoy it as an adult. I know that I watched a couple of the newer episodes and I wasn't a huge fan because my nieces and nephews, when they were kids, like they would watch Scooby-Doo because it just kept running on the air, I guess.
Yeah.
And they were obsessed with it, so I would watch it with them, but I wasn't as captivated with it as an adult as I was as a kid. So I mean, unless you watched it as a kid and didn't like it, then I don't know.
Yeah, I like the live action movies. I watched those when they came out, however old I was then,
well, that's
and I liked
because
them.
they had Buffy in them.
Yeah, they did. Sarah Michelle Gellar. Hey, Matthew Lillard does a really good job as
my gosh,
Shaggy.
Yes, does he ever? He was the best.
Actually, they
Shaggy.
all did. Everyone that was cast in that did a really good job. Freddie
Yeah.
Prinze Jr. did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
What's her name that played Daphne? No, Velma. I can't think of her name, but she was really good.
I watched them maybe once when they first came out long time ago, so I don't remember who played her. And I honestly forgot Freddie Prinze Jr. was in that movie, but that's where they met, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure that's where they met.
Yeah. That's too funny. So, what I was going to say was I don't know.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't know if it was Scooby-Doo as a kid or watching or reading the Nancy Drew books. Did you read the Nancy Drew books?
I don't like books.
Okay, that's fair.
I like comic books. I'm not a reader.
That's right. I should have known. But man, do I ever love a good mystery. And the mysteries just keep coming. So today's story is no different. However, it is a true story, not a fictional one. So this comes with a lot of sadness as well.
I sure hope so. This is a true crime podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
You'd be in trouble this week if it wasn't.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to do a fictional story today on our true crime podcast. This story is about a woman whose name was Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy was born on April 23rd, 1948 in Anaheim, California. Her parents were Vera and Jacob Scott. And growing up, Dorothy was described as being an introvert, which I can sort of relate with. She enjoyed a nice, quiet lifestyle and was a Christian who was deeply faithful and went to church regularly. She stayed away from drugs and alcohol as she would much prefer her time at home. And let's be honest, who doesn't do that sometimes? Dorothy welcomed a baby boy into her life in 1976 when she was around 28 years old. Sadly, the father wasn't around for long, as he would end up moving to Missouri, which was over 2,000 miles away, or 3,218.69 kilometers for our Canadian friends.
0.69.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. I actually didn't add that on purpose, but that worked out nicely. So Dorothy raised Sean while living with her aunt in Stanton, California, which was only about a 20-minute drive from Anaheim. Dorothy is what you would call an independent woman. She was working as a secretary for 2 stores that were jointly owned in Anaheim and was considered to be very dependable and organized. One of the shops was called Swingers Psych Shop, and the other one was called Custom John's Head Shop.
I'm sorry, what is Swingers Psych Shop?
Psych Shop. It's they sell like beads and incense and candles and things like that. So I would go as far as to say it was like a psychic shop where they
Interesting.
Crystals.
They really leading with the word swingers.
Swingers, I know.
Quite confusing.
I know.
They need to work on their marketing.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Are they still around? They could hire me.
Well, I saw pictures of it on the internet, but that doesn't mean obviously that they are still around, but the pictures looked fairly recent, more so than what they were back in the 80s, so I'm not sure, honestly. And since these shops were so close to where she grew up and where her parents still lived, she was able to take her son, Sean, over to their house to watch him while she was working her shifts. Jacob, her father, also co-owned the Swingers Psych Shop. We're going to capture the Klingon bird of prey and head back to the year 1980. Boy, the 80s, eh? What a time to be alive. Perms galore, bangs as high as the ceiling, corduroy pants. The list just goes on. Nikki, have you ever had a perm?
No, I have not, unfortunately. I've always wanted one. I wish I had naturally curly hair.
Really? Oh, I'm surprised that you never got a perm. I feel like the 80s was just perm central.
I didn't really do a lot to my hair until I decided to make my hair pink, and now it's a lot of work.
I was gonna say, I'm like, wow, because I feel like since I've known you, you've always had like drastically different colored hair, but I guess I met you when
It was just box dye.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh,
because I'm cheap like that, but not pink. The pink is not box dye.
No, definitely not. That's so funny. I actually had perms. I had a couple of perms when I was a kid.
You have naturally curly hair.
I do now. I did not when I was a kid. My hair was pinned straight.
That is very odd because your hair is extremely curly.
It is very curly. You're right. So it's funny because between my grade 7 picture and my grade 8 picture in school, you can see like grade 7, it's pin straight, and grade 8, it's like, what the hell do I do with the curls that are on my head right now? Because I had no idea how to do curly hair and it just happened. So, it was around that time. So yeah, pin straight hair as a kid, and I wanted curly hair. My sister was the same way. She had straight hair as a kid, and then it went curly when she got older in her teens. And she did the same thing. She wanted perms in her hair. So I, of course, wanted to be just like my big sister. So I begged for a perm to get in my hair. So I think I had 1 perm or maybe 2. My sister had a lot. And of course the bangs. The bangs were so high. I loved it.
I mean, I also grew up I was born in the 80s, but I was just a baby. And I grew up in the 90s, and perms, it was straight, flat hair.
Fair enough. That's very true. Yes, we are not the same age as much as I like to think that we are. I'm a little older than you. So the date was May 28th, 1980, and Dorothy had been heading home after work where they were having a staff meeting, which started around 9 p.m. when she noticed that one of her coworkers, Conrad Bostron, had a strange bite on his arm. He was also not looking too good, and the bite was raised, red, and looking swollen. So like the loving and caring person Dorothy was, she decided to take this coworker to the U.S. Irvine Medical Center to be assessed. Their other coworker, Pam Head, went with them to make sure that everything was okay. Before heading to the hospital, Dorothy thought it would be best to pop into her parents' place to let them know that she'd be a little bit late to get Sean because she was going to run her coworker to the hospital first. Because, in 1980, there were no cell phones. If you can imagine those days. I don't know if you can imagine those days, Nikki, can you? No cell
Me?
phones? Yeah.
There wasn't cell phones when I grew up.
Okay.
I was born in the 80s.
I know. Late 80s. I think they had car phones or something like that, though, in the 90s. She quickly exchanged her black scarf, which was great for a beautiful day, for a red scarf that would be much better for the cooler evenings. She hopped back into the driver's seat of her car, and then the three of them were off to the medical center. Dorothy and Pam waited in the waiting room while Conrad went in with the doctors to get checked out. It would turn out that poor Conrad was suffering from a black widow spider bite. No thanks. I am so terrified of spiders. I think they're probably my worst fear. I don't even want to imagine being bitten by a black widow.
I do not like spiders.
They were in Alberta. Did you know that? And I lived there and I didn't know that.
It's probably best that you didn't know that.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. Or I probably wouldn't have moved there. Luckily, I never saw one. Conrad was treated for the injury and then given a prescription for some antibiotics and sent on his way around 11 p.m. that night. Conrad and Pam decided to get the prescription refilled right then and there, because you can do that at that hospital apparently. And so Dorothy decided to go get the car and bring it around to the front so that Conrad wouldn't have to walk to the car. Conrad and Pam were at the front entrance waiting for Dorothy, and it would feel like a very long time before they finally saw Dorothy's car driving up to them in her 1973 Toyota station wagon. The car was speeding and the high beams appeared to be on, so they couldn't see who was behind the wheel, behind the blinding bright light. They assumed it was Dorothy until the car kept speeding right past them and then quickly veered to the right and drove right out of the hospital parking lot and disappeared into the night. The car was going too fast, like a blur, so they were unable to see who was driving the vehicle. Initially, Conrad and Pam tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe she was worried about her son. Maybe she called from a payphone and heard some bad news, so took off to go see him. Who knows what could have happened, but who suspects the worst at first? They waited hours. They still hadn't heard anything from Dorothy. They thought that Dorothy might return for them, so they just waited and waited. Until finally, they went to the phone in the hospital to call Dorothy's parents. Maybe Dorothy went to pick Sean up. Her parents were both adamant that Dorothy never came by at all. So what else was there for her coworkers to do? They decided it was time to call the police and report Dorothy missing. Of course, Dorothy was 32 years old at this point, so the police weren't very concerned for her well-being. She was an adult after all. The police would very quickly change their tune because it would be around 4:30 a.m. the next morning when someone would discover her vehicle in an alleyway in Santa Ana, which was only 10 miles from the medical center. It was entirely burnt out, as if someone lit a fire in it and just walked away. Police then were under the impression that Dorothy had been kidnapped. See, what people didn't know, but would later come out in the investigation, was that Dorothy had been receiving terrifying phone calls almost daily from a man that she didn't know, or at least couldn't remember. She thought she might have recognized the voice, but she couldn't recall exactly who it might have been. A friend of a friend? Maybe an acquaintance she met once or twice? She just couldn't remember. The man would either speak nothing but love for this woman, or he would speak nothing but vile hatred about how much he wanted to kill her. It was different every single time, and she never knew what to expect. Sometimes he would even recall details about her day-to-day activities, or what she was wearing, which indicated that he likely followed her as well, which has to be the creepiest realization of all. One call that was described by Dorothy's mother, Vera, horrified Dorothy to her core, and that was that he wanted to, quote, "When I get you alone, I will cut you up into bits so no one will ever find you," end quote.
He called her on the phone and said that?
He has been calling her, yeah, so...
But he actually said that to her?
He actually said those words, yes. Yeah. And she told her mother, and her mother is the reason why we know this.
But why did she not tell the police?
She did, and I will.
She told them that exact phrase?
Yes.
Oh.
And I will get to that. Yes, she sure did. One evening, she received a call from him, and he told Dorothy to look outside as he had left a gift for her. She looked outside and found a single dead rose on the hood of her car. Who would ever feel safe in their home or in their daily life after that? Dorothy was such a quiet woman and a devout Christian. She didn't think there was any reason anyone would ever feel the need to stalk her like this. This person was completely unhinged, and who knows what they would actually be capable of. Dorothy was feeling so unsafe. She decided to pick up karate lessons. Something near and dear to my heart. I can completely relate and understand how she would be feeling. She also considered purchasing a gun so that she could keep it on her in case something happened. Sadly, that would never happen, and she would only be in karate for 1 week before she disappeared. Police did try to trace these calls, but the man would always hang up before the trace could go through. They were never able to find out where the calls were coming from. This was the 1980s. There was a time when stalking and harassment on this level was rarely ever heard of, let alone thought of as serious or how dangerous it could be. There was also a serious lack of understanding about the mindset of a stalker and their behaviors, what makes them tick. How horrible it must have been for Dorothy to feel like the stalker was making her uncomfortable and unsafe in her own home and life, that he was able to watch her every move, to see where she worked, where her parents lived, that she had a son, that she took her co-workers to the hospital that night. How long did he follow her for? All day, every day? How was he not seen as a suspect from any neighbor or witness? Not one person saw this guy following her around for days, maybe even weeks or months. It was all a bit much. His obsession was beyond anything that would be considered normal or healthy. These can be known traits and behaviors of stalkers and should be considered something to be aware of because it could indicate how dangerous this person can be. This person, this mystery man, who had Dorothy, waited only 2 weeks before he started calling her mother Vera. He made sure to tell her that he had Dorothy. On that initial phone call, he said, quote, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" End quote. When she replied yes, then the caller said, "I've got her," and then hung up the phone. Vera would say that this man would call her every Wednesday when she would be alone in her room. He would recite details that only her kidnapper would know, like the fact that she had been wearing a red scarf when he grabbed her. Vera would tell the police what was going on. They made sure to let her know that she shouldn't tell anyone else about these details as it could compromise their case. Very understandable. But the police wouldn't be able to go very far with this new bit of information, and following it would prove to be futile. The parents would wait for 1 week to see if there would be any new leads in this case or any information from the police, but nothing came up, so Dorothy's dad, Jacob, decided to go to the media. He told Dorothy's story to the Orange County Register. So the newspaper decided to write a story about Dorothy's disappearance and all that the parents had decided to disclose. It would be published on June 12, 1980. That same day, the editor of the newspaper, Pat Riley, received a call from this same mystery man who said, quote, "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her." End quote. He would also spout out some information that only the real kidnapper would have known about, as it wasn't disclosed in the newspaper article, which included the color of the scarf that Dorothy was wearing the night she went missing. It's unclear if this man was talking about Conrad, who Dorothy took to the hospital that night, or if she was actually seeing someone else, although her parents had no knowledge of this boyfriend and had no idea when she would have had the time to be dating anyone, what with having to take care of her son when she wasn't working at one of her 2 jobs that she had. Clearly, this man was delusional. During the investigation, the police would interview the people who shopped at the two stores that Dorothy worked at. Since Dorothy was a secretary and worked in the back office, she didn't have a whole lot of interaction with the customers in the front end of the stores. For years, these calls to Dorothy's mother, Vera, would go on for. I don't know about you, but I would have changed my number and paid to have it unlisted, which you had to do back then. It was in April 1984 when Jacob would answer the phone. This time, the mystery man would hang up the phone immediately. He wouldn't call back for 4 months. Imagine how glorious these 4 months would have been, though, although I would always wonder if he was stalking me as well. Such a nerve-wracking experience.
See, I wouldn't change my number because if your child goes missing and you haven't found their body, you would want anything to hold on hope that you could find them.
That's totally
fair. So I
fair.
wouldn't change my number because I would want them to tell me where she is.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And also, if she ever got away, she would probably try to call her home number. So that's totally fair. You have to wonder why he wouldn't want Jacob to hear his voice, though. Was it because he didn't want Jacob to recognize it? It makes you wonder for sure. The case was getting colder by the day. The police had investigated Sean's father, Dennis Terry, but he was in Missouri during Dorothy's kidnapping. For long and grueling years after Dorothy's disappearance, on August 6th, 1984, her body was finally found. And by body, I mean skeletal remains. They were able to identify as belonging to Dorothy Jane Scott through dental records. She was located on a construction site that was very remote and isolated, only 10 meters from the Santa Ana Canyon Road. What was left of her was partially burnt. Apparently, there was a record of a fire happening at that exact location in October 1982, so that gave the police investigating the case a bit of a timeline. That is likely when she was killed and then burned. There was a turquoise ring that was found with her body and a watch that Vera was able to identify as belonging to Dorothy. It was noted that the watch had stopped working at 12:32 a.m. on May 29th, only an hour or so after Conrad and Pam had last seen Dorothy's vehicle speed away with her inside. The discovery of Dorothy's remains allowed the family to have a bit of closure in their lives. They finally could let her rest in peace. But along with this was the true realization that their baby girl was really gone for good. Along with her skeletal remains were also the skeletal remains of a dog that was beside her. There were rumors that there could be an argument said that this was related to the occult in some way, and could point to a neighbor across the street from the stores that she worked at, as he was believed to have been into those beliefs.
I don't get it. What is the connection with a dog?
With the occult?
Yes.
Apparently it's like a sacrificial burning of animal things. I don't know.
Because if they were going to kill her, wouldn't she be the sacrifice? Wouldn't that be a better sacrifice than a puppy?
I don't know. The way that they worded it in the articles that I read, it sounded like it was some sort of ritual that probably required both. And they called it a satanic ritual.
Was her body buried?
No, it was right on top of the ground. So I don't know how long. I'm guessing this was like an abandoned construction site because it had been a year before they found her? August 6, 1984, and they said that
2
the
years.
burning was 2 years.
It was in 82.
Yeah, 82. So almost 2 full years before anybody actually found her. So I don't know. I don't know enough about, obviously I don't know anything about the occult, and there wasn't enough information about what it could be related to, but this is just what, internet sleuths decided to go with. So they believed that it could point to a neighbor across the street from the store just because he also was into those beliefs, into the occult. His name was Mike Butler, but there was no evidence suggesting that he was the one who did this to Dorothy. There are detectives, and by detectives I mean internet sleuths out there, who have already built up a case against him. And you can go search for those online if you're so inclined, but I won't be speaking much further into that. As many people that are blaming this man for Dorothy's murder, there are just as many defending him, saying that people are just judging him based on his quote-unquote strange beliefs. Mike Butler would pass away in 2014. On August 22nd, 1984, Dorothy's family would have a memorial service for Dorothy to celebrate her new life in heaven. Sadly, the discovery of Dorothy's body was not the end of the calls from this unknown man to Dorothy's family. Only days later, he would call them again and ask Vera if Dorothy was home.
See, that's when I would change my number.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no more worry about, having Dorothy call since she's no longer with you. So let's change our phone number. How sick and awful for this poor, poor woman to have to hear those words knowing her daughter was no longer with them. The calls would only continue for who knows how long after. In 1994, Jacob Scott would pass away, and then Vera would also pass away in 2002. Sean would grow up but never have any clue what happened to his mother that day or why. To this day, no one knows who this unknown caller was that stalked, harassed, and then killed Dorothy Jane Scott. To this day, justice has not been served. Who knows who it could have been?
See, this is why I don't like unsolved mysteries. I have no closure.
I have no closure either. After reading this story, they did talk quite a bit. There was actually quite a bit written about this Mike Butler gentleman, but I don't like skeptical. He was never considered a suspect by the police, so there's no point in harping on that. I feel like if there was enough evidence to point to him, they probably would have looked into him. They might have already looked into him anyway and realized that he wasn't a suspect. Maybe he had an alibi. Nobody knows the real story there. So I didn't want to focus too much on that, but there was not really any other suspects that could have possibly done this. And Dorothy was just such an introvert with very close, she had her coworkers and she had her parents and she had her son. And that was pretty much all the people in her life. So who could have wanted to do this to her?
Did she know who this neighbor was?
The neighbor across, well, no. So they were saying that maybe it sounded familiar because maybe he came into the store every now and again because he was a neighbor to the shops, not to her.
Oh, okay.
So he was he lived across the street from the shops that she worked at, but where she worked in the back office, she likely never had any interactions with him. Maybe he came into the store. He did have connections to the occult, and that was for real. And this was a store that the Swingers Psych, I forget the first part of the name. Second part of the name.
It was Psych Shop.
Psych Shop, yeah. Swingers, because of the Swingers Psych Shop, and it sold things that might appeal to someone into the occult, then he likely went in there semi-frequently or maybe every now and again, and maybe she recognized his voice from just being in the shop. It's hard to say. So, but that's just people grasping at straws. So, yeah, that's the story about Dorothy Jane Scott. I can't imagine having no closure. Her parents said that it kind of gave them a little bit of closure after her body was found, but nobody knows why it happened.
Yeah, you don't have any justice.
No justice. You don't find the person who killed her. You don't know why they did it. Why did they pick her? Why grab her? And why would you do those things to her? I don't know. I don't understand. And if that person was in fact ill or whatever the case may be in this particular case, if there were any kind of mental instabilities, then you would think that they wouldn't have been able to just live out the rest of their lives without anything else coming up from that. You know what I mean? Having other stalking, once you have somebody stalking somebody and doing something like that, usually it escalates. It doesn't usually stop. But
yeah, it escalated into murder.
well, yeah, with that, and then I don't know, maybe that kind of satisfied him and to never do it again, I guess. But I guess we don't know. We don't actually know
It
that.
might not be a person that is just unstable and loves stalking. He might have just loved stalking this one person, and then once that one person was gone, he was uninterested in stalking anybody else.
That's very true. Very true. Could have been somebody from the church that she went to. She was very, very devoted to going to church regularly, so it might have been somebody that she knew from there, or maybe not knew, but heard his voice before at the church or something. Who knows? This was a very sad but wild mystery that will probably never get solved. I don't know.
No, I'd say at this point it won't.
No. And I don't even think they have, like, everything was burnt out, so they would have absolutely no, what do you call it, DNA evidence or anything like that. So it's probably something that will just go cold, and sadly no answers will be found.
Well, it is my turn to roll for a category.
All right, let's hear
Megan, tell everybody what is a gift you got for your birthday that you can start using?
I got a set of dice, which I'm super grateful for. Thank you, Nikki and her husband.
You're welcome. I got you. Hopefully that D20 has better juju and you can roll some better rolls.
That's what I'm hoping for. I have it sitting right beside me. I switched it out for my other one. My other one went back into my D&D book.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Well, Megan.
Oh, do I get to pick?
You should probably open up our story themes.
Oh, somebody crit one, apparently.
I had a crit fail. This sounds a lot like their D&D night the other week when I was doing so good and I was rolling so well. And then at two of the worst possible times, I rolled crit ones. But luckily, nobody else got killed.
It's so true. I don't know how that happened. You were killing it. You were literally...
I was rolling like a total of like 36 and 38s for my stealth roll because I put all my stuff into stealth. So I have all kinds of modifiers. So I was rolling like 19s and 20s plus like whatever I had. I have like a plus 16 or a plus 18 to my stealth or something. And I was pretty much moonwalking my way through murdering people. And nobody was catching me or seeing me. Literally, that was my description.
Yeah,
because I would roll so well, and our DM is very awesome. So if you roll really
20.
well, he'll be like, "How do you want to kill them?" Or "How did you do this?"
Yeah.
You tell me because you rolled so good that you tell me.
Exactly.
So I was literally moonwalking while murdering people with my swords, and then I rolled a crit one.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. It was so good though. Just watching it happen, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're killing it. Like, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden it went way wrong, way fast. All right, I'm looking at the story themes here. Let me see which one I want you to do.
Pick me an easy one.
Easy one? How about basements give me the creeps?
Sure.
Okay. All right. This is better than when I roll a 20 for you.
If you want to follow us on social media, you can find us at the Grimdark Diaries. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. There are pictures on there. The Instagram ones are way better. So go on there, please.
It's true. You see all the pictures of all the stories that we do.
Yeah, every time we do a case, when it releases, I will make a post on there with a little carousel of pictures that you can scroll through, so you can usually see the people involved in the story. Sometimes you can see some crime scene photos. Sometimes I put something funny as the last photo. It'll be a surprise. You have to go see. We're also on Twitter, but not very active. But you can find us on there. We're not that. We're just Grimdark Diaries because there was a character limit and it was the last one we made. So we really blew it on that one.
Yep.
Please don't judge us.
Just like we do with all the posts on it.
Yeah. If you want to email us or get in contact with us, you can find us at thegrimdarkdiaries@gmail.com. If you have Apple Podcast, you can give us a rating, preferably a 5-star. You can give us a comment. All of these things help us, and they make us very, very happy. If you don't have Apple Podcast, you can follow or subscribe or like or do whatever the thing is that your podcast app does. And if your podcast app doesn't do anything and you're like, hey, I still would like to do something nice, you can share our social media or share our podcast and just like scream it at people when you're out in public. And that would also be appreciated. And then if you do those things, then we'll give you a shout out and be like, hey, this person is awesome and they shared us and we really appreciate it. So do that thing. We would like you to do that thing.
Absolutely.
Make sure you tune in next week to see what I come up with for Basements Give Me the Creeps. And remember, a friend in the dark beats alone in the light.